Well, China and the US have celebrated the 50th anniversary of Ping Pong Diplomacy in the US city of Houston. And the commemoration marks the start of the exchange of visits of Chinese and American table tennis players. For the latest, let's go to my colleague Sean Caleb's in Houston. Sean, hello there. Well, tell us more about the event, which is very significant indeed.
Li Dongning, you're exactly right. It's really hard to characterize just how important this event could be to China-U.S. relations moving forward, and really from a sports angle, just how important this event is, how much the U.S. and other table tennis nations really had to overcome to make this event happen, considering the global pandemic. And 90 countries are here and will be competing for the World Championships in table tennis. But there is no question, much of the focus remains on China and the United States. Its footprint is really everywhere. Everyone talking about this being the 50th anniversary of the so-called Ping Pong Diplomacy. What a chance meeting with a table, two paddles, and a little celluloid ball, and players from different countries. The tectonic changes that really led to normalizing relationships between the United States and China, and also just the amazing changes that China has gone through the past 50 years, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. So people looking back on that historic event. And there was a gala here where we are. This is where the event is being held, but we're also outside a ballroom where there was a dinner just a short while ago, and so many of the people who were instrumental in the event 50 years ago from the U.S. side were here, and being recognized for all of their efforts, and also recalling just how important that moment was. And to a person, they said they really realized that they were in a very historical moment at that time when they were in China playing, and then of course the next year when the Chinese athletes came to the United States. But there were also a number of high-level speakers here as well, including former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, of course, played a very important role, and also the newly appointed Chinese ambassador to Washington. They talked about what this event could mean moving forward.
The ping pong team, which went to China on a self-appointed diplomatic mission, made a great contribution. And I want to thank Connie Swearis and Judy Hofrost, who are here with us after all these years. And I want to let everybody know of the ping pong table tennis community, how much even seemingly peripheral events can contribute to international understanding and to peace among two great nations.
Until the past 50 years, China-US relations have gone through twists and turns and made historical achievements. Today, the seeds of friendship sown through ping pong diplomacy has gone into a towering tree. The two people's friendship represents a consistent driving force for the development of the China-US relationship. In recent years, China-US relations have met serious difficulties. This is not in the fundamental interests of the two countries and the peoples. And a better relationship between us is the shared expectation of the two peoples.
Well, Sean, China's Wang Manyu and US Qin Gang teamed up for the mixed doubles, beating out Russia's team in the World Table Tennis Championships in Houston already. Well, this championship is being seen as a historically significant event. What's the atmosphere there?
You know, I think you're exactly right again. If you look at what is unfolding down on the court, the event kicked off today, and as you mentioned, mixed doubles in really every sense of the word. Players from the U.S. and China teaming up the first time ever, and this created a great deal of buzz just a couple of days ago when it was announced, and last night all the media got to watch a sort of exhibition match where Chinese and U.S. players squared off against each other, sort of a harbinger of what to look for coming up during this next week. And the fact that these two nations can get together and put members of a team together down and square off against each other, I think everybody's hoping that perhaps this could be ping pong diplomacy 2.0. Could this be a chance for the two nations to again work and discuss and kind of open up these person-to-person meetings, people-to-people meetings? We hear so much about that, but seeing it happen live in front of you, when you get people in the same room, quite often good things happen. They realize they have a lot in common, more in common than they have perhaps separated by their differences. So the fact that this can happen, this does happen, everybody's taking this as something very positive. And we heard the ambassador talk about it just a bit ago. It doesn't do any nation on earth good to have a controversial or an overly competitive relationship with another country. So if they can get together, focus on what they can work on together, then certainly good things can come out of that. Will it happen? Difficult to say, but good things have happened before in these people-to-people ties when they sit down, and now maybe they're standing up with that ping pong ball separating the two, but it's going to be an interesting week, and hopefully some positive elements can come out of this.
Indeed, and let's hope so. At least there was a successful example before. Thank you very much, Sean Caleb's reporting from Houston. Well, 3 months after the U.S. table tennis team made historic visit to China, then U.S. President Richard Nixon made history of his own. He announced he would travel to China to meet with the country's top leaders at the height of the Cold War. It was the first time a sitting U.S. president traveled to the Chinese mainland, and that week-long trip set the geopolitical adversaries on the path towards normalization, as Tony Waterman explains.
On February 17, 1972, hundreds of well-wishers gathered on the south lawn of the White House,
President Nixon's departure for China,
looking to be part of what would become one of the most important diplomatic trips in U.S. history. President Richard Nixon and the First Lady were headed to China.
We, of course, are under no illusions that 20 years of hostility between the People's Republic of China and the United States of America are going to be swept away by 1 week of talks. What we must do is to find a way to see that we can have differences without being enemies in war.
It was dubbed the Journey for Peace. The trip, the culmination of 2 years of secret negotiations, catapulted into the public sphere through table tennis. Both sides were eager to bridge diplomatic barriers, and in the months leading up to the trip, Nixon had ended a decades-old trade embargo against China.
My grandfather thought about China for a long time before he went to China. Of course, he wrote an article in Foreign Affairs in 1967 about how China would be a key element towards winning the Cold War and ending the Vietnam War.
The 8-day trip involved high-level meetings with Chairman Mao Zedong and Premier Zhou Enlai, but also cultural exchanges, including a visit to the Great Wall, the Peking Zoo, and a number of banquets.
I think the hospitality the Chinese people demonstrated to my grandfather and other leaders of the United States and around the world that China was a country that you could work with.
The trip ended with the Shanghai Communique, in which both sides pledged to work towards normalizing relations and expanding people-to-people contacts. Americans soon started traveling to China, while U.S. companies began establishing a foothold in the market. By 1979, full diplomatic relations had been established.
Now, for more on the new ping pong diplomacy, we're now joined live by Jeff Moon in Washington, D.C. He's the president of consulting firm China Moon Strategies. Jeff, hello there. Welcome to Global Watch. Well, this actually is the first time the tournament is being held in the U.S., so this is another piece of history. In the finals, we'll see China and U.S. joining forces. As we just learned, 2 pairs will be made up of Chinese-American players side by side in mixed doubles to mark the 50-year anniversary of ping pong diplomacy. When we talk about this a new move, actually, some say it's a resonation of the move 50 years ago. Do you think so? Do you think this this double mix will work as 50 years ago?
The symbolism really is very appealing. It reminds us of the 50th anniversary of the reopening of the relationship and the role that ping pong played. I think the fact that the U.S. is hosting all of this is a reflection of openness and actually also a willingness to overcome COVID-19, which caused the cancellation last year of the tournament. The mixed doubles games with mixed American and Chinese players is also highly symbolic and reflects the fact that, at least at an individual level, the two countries can get along very happily. The bigger picture is that all of this highlights the value of people-to-people exchanges, which really teach us that people are just people, despite the fact that they speak different languages or eat different food or have different governments. And when average people get together from different countries, amazing things can happen, as they did 50 years ago. People that have common interests find that they can get along and make friends. I wouldn't be surprised if the players become friends, long-term friends. And I see that several of the people that were involved in all this 50 years ago are still involved in the ping pong diplomacy of today, which reflects the importance and the power of it all.
Indeed, well, this is a very successful example, at least 50 years ago, and we also saw other very successful examples like the wrestling game between Iran and the US, and also cricket match between India and Pakistan. So how would you evaluate soft diplomacy like the sports events? How significant do you think, how significant role it plays in the general diplomacy?
Well, activities like this are what diplomats call public diplomacy. And public diplomacy differs from traditional diplomacy because it primarily involves non-governmental individuals and organizations. And people-to-people exchanges are a great way for people to interact directly. All of this affects the official diplomatic relationship in several ways. At a grassroots level, it strengthens relations between people and local groups that can build friendships and that can propel the relationship forward for many years, as we've seen. At a subnational level, where we're talking about towns and cities and states and provinces, these kinds of activities can build those kinds of subnational relationships, which are also very important. I see that the mayor of Houston has been very active in the ping pong diplomacy in Houston this week. And I presume that relations between Houston and friends in China and perhaps the state of Texas and China will be strengthened as well. At a national level, the diplomatic impact of something like this, I think, really depends on the national agendas and the values of the governments and the postures that they're in. In 1971, both President Nixon and Chairman Mao were looking for an opportunity to reestablish relations. At this point in the US-China relationship, I think the countries probably disagree more than they agree on things, and it's not clear that either side is really willing to take anything more than symbolic steps to improve the relationship. So I'm kind of skeptical that this year's tournament will be as impactful as it was in 1971. But there is some hope, because you never know. Who in 1970 predicted that American ping pong players would come the following year to Beijing and that President Nixon would come after that? No one did. But all that happened, and so we'll have to wait and see what happens in the future.
That's indeed true. We don't know what will happen next, but we do hope that this little ball will work magic once again. Thank you very much, Professor Jeff Moon from Washington, D.C.